announcement that Joe Biden, the Democrat candidate for president in the U.S. elections, has picked Kamala Harris as his running mate and VP nominee has had everyone in a flutter, especially back here in India, where Kamala Harris's Indian roots have been now examined fairly closely over the last 12 hours or so. For those who are uninitiated, the Democrat politician Kamala Harris is born to a Jamaican father and an Indian mother. She is many firsts, actually. She strikes off many firsts. She would be the first black woman and the first Indian origin woman to be a vice presidential nominee. Before we move ahead and talk about the implications and what does this mean for India, if anything at all, let's take a look at the story of Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris has arguably captured more headlines than Joe Biden himself as his running mate. The daughter of a Jamaican economist at Stanford and a scholar mother of Indian origin, Kamala proudly wears her Brahmin lineage and biracial roots. She is a Harvard graduate herself, and soon she earned the moniker Female Obama for the similarities she has in academics and the issues that she stood for with the former American president. Now, Kamala's impeccable credentials have helped her claim the spot as the final Democratic choice to run for Vice President of the United States. Kamala is the first black woman to serve as a district attorney in the state of California, the first black American and the first woman to hold the office of Attorney General in California. In 2017, she became the rising star for the Democrats when she became the Senator of California, the first South Asian American to ever hold that position, and now the first person of Indian descent as the choice to run for Vice President. Kamala Harris herself had been a contender in the presidential run this time, but Kamala soon after helped Biden raise millions in funds for his campaign. The world is going to be closely watching her steps into the spotlight this November. Biden, running for presidency, is already 77 years old. If he wins the term this time and chooses not to run for re-election, that would squarely put Kamala as the heir apparent in 2024. With Rishabh Chakraborty, Vikram Oza in Mumbai for ET Now.
All right, so many out there are celebrating because of Kamala Harris's Indian roots. There are others who caution against acting as if this is some achievement of our own. We'll keep that debate aside for the moment and look at what Kamala Harris's politics are. And if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris do make it to the #1 and #2 spot in the White House, what does it mean for India and Indo-American relationships? To talk about that, I'm joined now by Michael Kugelman, Deputy Director of the Asia Program and Senior Associate for South Asia at the Wilson Center. Michael, great to have you on the show as always. Why don't you begin by telling us a bit about Kamala Harris, the politician? Today in India, everyone's been talking about Kamala Harris' Indian roots. And where she came from and how she's connected to India. But I want to understand how you see her as a politician in this presidential race that is ensuing. What does she stand for?
Well, I think I really associate Ms. Harris really with the center-left part of the Democratic Party here in the United States. She's certainly not as progressive as someone like Bernie Sanders, but certainly she's more liberal than the conservative wing of the Democratic Party. There's a pretty wide array of ideological views within the party, as there is within the Republican Party, of course. But she, what we've seen from her time as an attorney general in California and in some of her other, many of her other activities as a senator, is that she has really, particularly in recent years, tried to cast herself as a progressive, as a liberal, someone who tries to stand up for the undertrodden, that type of thing. And in terms of foreign policy perspectives, I think that her views are quite conventional and in line with the Democratic Party on the whole. In terms of South Asia policy, that indicates that she is indeed a very strong proponent of the U.S.-India relationship. She also is a big proponent of withdrawing U.S. forces from Afghanistan. not unusual within the Democratic Party. So I think that to me, she stands out as someone who's center left, certainly not on the fringe of either side, conservative or liberal, within the Democratic Party. But I think she's someone that will be a very solid pick for Joe Biden, given that she's a historical candidate for the reasons that you've laid out. And I think it had always been clear that Biden was going to select a female candidate, and particularly a female candidate of color.
Michael, just on the Indian perspective, obviously here everyone's cheering because it also tells you how someone from the diaspora can go that far in the United States. It's very telling of how open that society also is. But I want to understand if this impacts the Indian vote at all. We were talking about this when the whole Modi rally took place in the United States, that Trump wanted to woo the Indian voter and how the rally might have helped him. Does Kamala Harris being in the picture change that equation as far as the Indian American vote is concerned?
Well, it's hard to tell. It's very interesting in that she has never really worn her Indian American identity on her sleeve. She has certainly not shied away from it, she has, as you've noted, highlighted her Indian roots on quite a number of occasions. But she also is, of course, a Black American, and she, I think, has really emphasized that aspect to her background. And what's interesting is that about 2 years ago, there was a poll of Indian Americans here in the U.S., and it found that significant numbers of them actually did not even know about her Indian roots, about her ties to the Indian American community. That was 2 years ago, before she had the name recognition that she does now as presidential candidate and now the VP pick. But I think that's an interesting question to get at. But at any rate, as you well know, Indian Americans in the U.S. have tended to typically vote Democratic, but the Trump campaign in 2016 was aware of that. And for the first time, you had a Republican presidential campaign that was really making big pushes to get votes from Indian Americans. And you mentioned the whole Houston, the Howdy Modi rally, that clearly meant to pick up Indian American votes in the election. But I think that in this case, I think it'll help in terms of getting Indian American votes, but not necessarily. It's as you know, the Indian American community is not a monolith when it comes to voting power. Certainly, it tends to vote for Democrats. But you look at someone like Kamala Harris, who on the one hand supports the U.S.-India relationship, but she has also been quite emphatic in her support for Kashmir, and she's actually been quite critical of India over the last year in terms of how its policies in Kashmir. At one point, she said that Kashmiris are not alone, which I think is the kind of statement that may not endear her to at least some members of the Indian American community. But I do think at this point, Indian Americans, even despite efforts by Republicans to try to get at some of those votes, I do think that this continues to be, for the most part, a bloc that will favor the Democratic Party. And Biden bringing an Indian American into as his VP choice, that certainly will not hurt at the least in terms of picking up more votes from that community.
Tell me about why Donald Trump has been reacting so strongly to this announcement and to this nomination. If you look at the US President's Twitter timeline, the last tweet before he presumably went off to sleep, the first tweet when he's woken up, and both of them attacking Kamala Harris, one of them suggesting that she will be the one in charge more than Joe Biden if they come to power. Why does Kamala Harris bother Donald Trump so much?
Well, I mean, I think what we've seen with Donald Trump is just about everyone that's not on his side is someone that bothers him. And, unfortunately, we've seen the particularly nasty things that he has said about females, particularly prominent female politicians, including those of color. I imagine that whoever Biden's VP choice was, the president would have responded with an attack. But unfortunately, given his track record, the fact that this is a female and a female of color, that unfortunately makes it even more likely that he would react in this way. But, he is on the attack. He knows that he's very politically vulnerable at this point in the presidential campaign, and he's going to waste no opportunity, I think, to go on the attack, which is something that he's always done and feels that his rank and file and his support base will really like. So he's going to do whatever he can to try to demean the other side, so to speak, and in this case, the the Democratic ticket.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Michael, for joining us and giving us some perspective to this story beyond the cheering that has been going on over here. And I think one important point that Michael Kugelman made is that Kamala Harris has not really worn her Indian identity on her sleeve, even though she's not shied away from it. We'll have to see if that changes. I think another point that has got people so excited is about the rise of so many Indian origin politicians in important positions of power in various countries over the last few years. You see a familiar sounding name and face, and you feel that there is some representation even on the other side of the world. Well, we'll take a very short break at this point, but don't go away, because the India Revival Mission Special is up next.